My name is Christine and I'm the Supervisor of Library Events and Marketing here for the library. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which each of us are on. I pay respect to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and I celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal cultures and languages across Australia. I acknowledge the Gadigal and the Bidjigal peoples who are the traditional custodians of this land where Randwick City Library is located, and I invite each of you to acknowledge the country where you are. It's a privilege to welcome the authors of the Use It All Cookbook, Alex and Jaimee, here tonight, and I'm also so very pleased to welcome Julian Lee, who is Randwick City Council's Sustainability Education Officer. Welcome. If you guys could turn on your cameras and say hello.
Hello.
Hi. So I'll just do a quick overview. Alex Elliott is a leading voice on the war of food waste, co-founder of boundary breaking food community Cornersmith in Sydney, a media personality who demos food hacks as the warm up act for bands at festivals, and Use It All is her third book. Jaimee Edwards teaches fermentation and traditional cooking skills at the Cornersmith Cooking School, and her food writing has appeared in every major Australian food publication. I can't wait to learn more about how we can use it all. But before I hand over to you, Julian, can you first of all tell us a little bit about the work you do on Randwick Council's behalf and why learning to use it all and wasting less is so important? Over to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. As the Sustainability Education Officer at Randwick Council, I've been working in the food space for many years, including working with Alex in an organic food box company that I ran many years ago. So it's great to reconnect here today. From my perspective, learning to use it all and wasting less is important for so many reasons. One, it's great for the hip pocket. Two, you become a better and more interesting cook. It can be healthier. And also it's good for the planet and can be in some surprising ways. And at Council, we support this through the introduction this year of FOGO, which is Food Organics and Garden Organics, meaning that you can put food into your green bin as well, for all Randwick residents. And at the Randwick Sustainability Hub, where I'm based, we run programs that teach people how to grow food in the city from our award-winning permaculture gardens. And we do this because we know that people who grow their own food, even if it's just a pot of basil on your kitchen windowsill, have a much greater appreciation for food and waste less of it. So it's really fantastic to have Alex and Jaimee here. And I'd love to hear a little bit about Cornersmith Cafe and how that blossomed into a cooking school and many books, including the one we're here tonight about Use It All.
Sure, well, I might take that one.
Yes.
I started Cornersmith with my partner James about, God, it must be 10 years ago, I reckon now. And actually, Jaimee's been with us since the very beginning. So we started it because I wanted to, my partner James was really interested in opening a hospitality venue, I guess. But we wanted to take that ethos that we sort of try to like live by at home and see if we could make that work in a business setting as well. So I've always been interested in food and like a little bit in sustainability. I wouldn't say that in those days I was dabbling in it, but I got really interested in living in a busy urban area and figuring out how to be more sustainable at home, how to be more mindful and thoughtful about food, and also just try and understand our food system a little bit better, because I felt like I was really in that process of like doing a big shop at the beginning of the week, filling up the fridge. At the end, I had 2 little kids. At the end of the week, just throwing a whole lot of food away. So I just kind of wanted to understand that cycle a little bit more. Did heaps of research, read heaps of books, started cooking from scratch a lot. And I guess that kind of got me on this train about pickling and preservation, which then led into more and more and like just being totally obsessive about the whole thing, which then sort of was the beginning of Cornersmith. So James and I put our heads together to try and make a really great cafe that, you know, had good food and had good coffee and had a good vibe, but also had a really strong message behind it. And that was, 10 years ago. So Jaimee and I met in the park because we were like both 25 and had babies, and like we're the only people that in the world that had a small child at that time, and all our friends were at parties. So we met, and it was really nice to meet someone who wanted to talk about food as well, and wanted to talk about food more than just like what was for dinner, but like the politics around it and the social issues around it and the environmental impact of dinner. And I guess Jaimee and I have been talking about dinner for the last, 10 years or more, boring each other. And then luckily got to write a book, which is basically 10 years worth of conversations of us figuring out what on earth we were going to feed the children that we felt good about, but also was good for the planet as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jaimee, would you like to add anything to that story?
Well, I mean, that is the story. We've joked that this book is a culmination of a 10+ year conversation about what's for dinner. And I think it's also, we've read a lot of cookbooks, we've read a lot of kind of theoretical work around food politics and a food system. And we've kind of gone the whole gamut of, having a more neurotic approach to buying everything in season and preserving everything in season. And slowly, as our children have grown, our lives have become more busy. We have loosened not our ethics around it, but we have figured out ways that we can incorporate those skills into busy lives, where we don't spend a weekend bottling tomatoes. We do little bits and pieces. And I think that's where we have, with this book particularly, and just our own sanity, where we've kind of like, okay, this is the future of doing it. Because I think it's overwhelming to imagine that, or kind of off-putting sometimes, that you are going to make, bottles and bottles of tomato passata, jars and jars of apricot jam, like that. There's something, well, it's quaint and old-fashioned, but there's also something that's just not really practical about doing that. So we are more interested now, having come full circle, like what do those skills look like when you've got five minutes, when you're making spaghetti bolognese and doing something else. And so that's kind of what the book is looking at, as well as what is reflected of our lives, of how we preserve these days.
And I think, to add to that, the cooking school, we had the Cornersmith Cafe in Marrickville for a year, and then the cooking school came about because people were bringing us in all their backyard produce. So you guys are Randwick Council, but Marrickville is full of fruit trees and fig trees and mulberry trees. And we just noticed how much food was being wasted by being like just rotting on the pavement, because people didn't know how to manage it, basically. So I feel like we started this trading program where people could drop in their excess stuff that they didn't know what to do with, which made us realize that actually people don't have the skills or the knowledge to know how to combat food waste. So the cooking school came out of this it sort of just organically evolved, in that I was like, hang on, people grow all this food, they don't actually know how to manage it, because there's only so much you can eat, and food has a finite time frame. So we took that interest to try and make this cooking school that was not nostalgic, like what Jaimee was saying. It's not sentimental about, like
the old days, and
being like the old days, homesteady. We really wanted to get people actually to learn how to do this stuff, and to make it really accessible and easy for people. And Jaimee and I have been running the school together for, I don't know, it must be 8 years now. We just teach so many people all the time, and we cannot put on enough of these classes. And to me, that's so heartening, because there's hunger and there's knowledge, and people want this information, and it's not getting passed down in families. So I sometimes feel a bit ridiculous that, we have Italian women come in that are our age that didn't learn from their mother because they weren't interested, and then suddenly we're teaching them. But I think there's something nice that it's having a renaissance with a kind of contemporary edge to it, and a city edge to it as well, because Jaimee and I work full time and we have teenagers, and we love the city.
We love the city. There's this idea that this is the sort of thing that happens when you have a nice country home and you have chickens and you make bread and you do this. Well, you know, a lot of us will be in the city for the rest of our lives and we can still do these things.
Fantastic. So to your book, Use It All, it's not the first book you've written, and it's also not the first cookbook for busy people. What is it that you would say really makes this book stand out? Besides my mouth's watering when I open it.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you, Julian. Look, we went in, I've done 2 other Cornersmith books that are much more about the Cornersmith experience. With this book and writing it with Jaimee as well, I guess we wanted to go in. And like Jaimee and I love cookbooks. We're obsessed with cookbooks. Like my house and Jaimee's house is full of cookbooks, but there's something that doesn't work in that you've got recipe, long list of ingredients, recipe, long list of ingredients. So you're constantly kind of starting a meal by going and having to buy a long list of stuff, make this meal, clean up, and then start again. And I think what we wanted to get into people's heads throughout the book is that the kitchen has to be this place in your home that is always in motion. And like that means that you have a bit of a crazy kitchen, but there's something kind of nice about that as well. But it also means that you're bringing food into your house, however you get that, whether that's that you grow food or that you shop at the farmers markets or that you shop at Woolworths, like whatever you do to get food into your home, to think about it as a longer term kind of project, I guess. So whether that's over a couple of days or a week or a month or whatever works for you. And I really wanted the book to not be, tonight we're having Thai and then tomorrow we're having spinach pie. And then like I wanted it to be, this week, this is what we have and this is how we figure out how to use everything that we've brought into this house. And I think that's what makes it, I guess it's a guide really, I would say, as a way to really think about your kitchen in a different way and that the wheels are kind of constantly in motion. Jaimee and I, it sounds like we cook all the time. We actually are very lazy cooks. Like we get home from work at 5:30 or 6 o'clock and yet we get dinner on the table, but it's not cooking for hours. It's just kind of understanding food and understanding ingredients and figuring out how to turn a small amount of something into something more. So I guess that's what the heart of the book is. And then we wanted to add all of the lovely stuff that we love, which is seasonality and preservation, but to make it really accessible. Like, so really like there's stuff in there that is very, very quick and very easy, as well as, you know, projects that are a little bit more complex as well. Do you agree with that, Jaimee?
Yeah, I think that a lot of our favorite cookbooks, and I think a lot of other people's approach to cooking, particularly when you get these beautiful cookbooks or beautifully photographed, these exotic ingredients or even not exotic ingredients, is that cooking is kind of like, it's time consuming. It's a weekend project where eating, a love of food, a love of cooking is something you incorporate into your life. And if you know a few things, and there's no getting around that, like there's, loving food, loving cooking, loving eating will require you to have a better relationship with food, which is more than just ordering Uber Eats and then like doing something elaborate on the weekend. But once you kind of get into a rhythm, like what Alex is saying, that the kitchen becomes this dynamic space, and it's really, the cliche of the kitchen being the heart of the home, when that really is pumping, then it becomes quite, there's a rhythm to it, and you're not a slave to the kitchen, but the kitchen is a pleasurable space and you can pump a meal out in half an hour.
Quite quickly, with a bit of rubbish that's lying around in the fridge. Yeah. And I think that's kind of how Jaimee and I cook, is that, and that what we've been talking about for so long, which is like, we'll be at work doing whatever we're doing, and every single day, one of us says, "What's for dinner tonight?" Like without fail for 10 years. I can't do maths, but that's a lot of that conversation. Jaimee will be like, "Oh, I've only got a leek and a handful of blah." And like by the end of the conversation, we've kind of come to a meal that actually sounds really great and really cool. So I think there is a skill in learning how to look in the fridge, look in the pantry, look in the fruit bowl. And that is the first, like if you want to make a sustainable change, my 2 top tips are firstly, buy in season only, ever. And only from Australia when it comes to fruit and veg. But secondly, look in the fridge or the fruit bowl or the pantry before you leave the house every day. Because then all day it's kind of like it's ticking over. And you're like, oh yeah, I've got that little bit of, I could do this. And let a small ingredient inspire a meal. So, you know, if it is like Jaimee will be like, oh, I've got these like anchovies that have been hanging around for so long. And I'm like, make Caesar salad. And she's like, cool. All I need to do is pick up 2 chicken thighs and an iceberg lettuce. And then suddenly the anchovies are used up and you're feeling good about it. So let little ingredients be the hero rather than the other way around. Like it doesn't have to be the roast chicken that is the hero.
Because that's how you end up with too much food, is when you go, oh, well, I guess if I'm going to make pad thai tonight, you go, oh, and make another list. Like that's how you just keep buying and buying and buying. You have to let the food you already have guide you.
Like your stupid water chestnuts.
Exactly.
Please use those things up. Every day, Jamie's like, the water chestnuts.
I was going to make the fried rice. I made the fried rice. Alex is a master at fried rice and stir frying. I don't seem to have that genetic makeup. But I set out to use these water chestnuts. I made the fried rice. It was okay. I'm getting better. I turn around. What I didn't use was the bloody water chestnuts.
So that's going to
do it again.
Be back on the menu. So yes, look, this is a very long answer to a quite simple question. But what we wanted to do is find a book that felt real, like it feels like it is in people's houses and in people's lives. And Jaimee and I are a very good example of that. It is not. It's not all like, I don't know. Like there's my
aspirational
right now. But, you know, I guess we wanted to really get across that you can cook and eat like this in busy lives. And there's shit weeks, like we all have them. And that's the weeks that you get pizza and you buy a takeaway lasagna. Like do whatever you need to do to get through. But predominantly, there is a way to make this kind of manageable. So we broke the book up into shopping baskets, and they're seasonal ones because we really I just want to hammer into everyone, please eat seasonally. We don't need cherries in winter. We do not. Oh, look, there they are. And they look so nice. My favorite one is I'm very fond of the whole cauliflower and the whole chicken and all of that. But actually the chickpeas and the beef bones, that's a good week when you've got those ones. And that's winter, so you should do that one now. So we wanted
that's basket 6.
Yeah. So we wanted to break it up into, in the warmer months, this is what you should be eating. In the winter months, this is what, in the height of summer, this is what you should be eating. And they've got predominantly fruit and vegetables in them, a small protein of some kind. It doesn't have to be meat. That could be chickpeas, that could be fish, it could be whatever you want it to be. And then some pantry staples as well. So we were hoping that would get people's heads into seasonality, actually buying less food, like not buying as much. That's a good basket. That often is, I mean, everyone's got green things and cheese and eggs. And then we go through and we show you guys how to use everything. If that's what you've got in your house, multiple meals using those ingredients. Jaimee and I are not into meal planning, except for these ridiculous conversations that we have. And I think allow yourself flexibility of, fuck, I'm too tired, I'm just going to get takeaway. But also keep in mind that tomorrow night you are going to have to deal with those 3 broccoli heads that you bought. So I think it's, for us, it's the way that we shop and it's the way that we cook.
Wonderful. So it seems to me that food basket's sort of a bit at the heart of this, and it's sort of like crossing over between just buying what you need every single meal and using it all no matter what you've got in there.
Yeah.
I think that if you're going to start thinking sustainably, it is, Alex indicated toward this earlier, it is a more holistic picture, and it's kind of a whole, I suppose, consumer cycle from deciding what you're going to buy, how you're going to store food, what you're going to cook, how you're going to deal with the leftovers, how you're going to deal with scraps. Like there's a whole story that you have to account for. And so starting with being able to shop well and smart is going to make that, those decisions that you make further down the track in that whole journey, it's going to make it easier, it's going to make it less wasteful, it's certainly going to make it more economical. Start with shopping well, you'll end up with less in the bin.
And I think shopping well is probably a good thing to talk about, in that Jaimee and I have done so much research. Like we've read so many books and listened to so many podcasts, and you can get really overwhelmed with too much information as well. But I think if you decide on the things that are important to you, so for me, it's seasonality, and I feel like food miles are really important. I think it's insane to be flying in asparagus in the middle of winter, or cherries from California, or even oranges in summer from overseas. Like I think to me that doesn't work. So I'm 100% about seasonality. I think if packaging is your thing, like that's really what you want to battle, then you need to shop smart at the supermarket. You need to buy like the oats that are in paper rather than the oats that are in plastic. You need to buy an entire cabbage, not half a cabbage wrapped in plastic. And that means you're going to be eating cabbage for a while. But that also means it's kind of fun in that you're like, we need to not feel like we're eating cabbage every day. So what can we do? So the book is kind of about that as well, about buy a whole ingredient. Forget that you're going to, we don't want you to feel like all you eat is cabbage. So we've given you 15 ideas of what to do with cabbage so it doesn't feel like that. On the weeks that you buy cabbage, maybe don't buy lettuce. Let that be your lettuce. Yeah. On the weeks that you've got celery in the house, don't buy herbs because you've got all those celery tops. So use those as your herbs instead. So we're actually trying to tell you to buy less food. And don't buy things that you just think will be lovely. Like buy things that you actually know everyone eats and everyone enjoys as well. And then once you get to the end of the week and you're like, oh, I bought all those bloody kiwi fruits and now the kids hate kiwi fruits, figure out like simple preserving skills, like whether that's freezing food, whether it's dehydrating food in the oven, whether it's making jam, whatever it is that you like doing, have some of those up your sleeve as the biggest way to combat food waste at the end of the week. So your cycle becomes shop really smart, store your food really well, and then deal with the tired things at the end. So this slide's about using up all your tired herbs because you had big visions at the beginning of the week. So you bought the coriander and the dill and the mint, and actually you didn't hardly used any of them. So we teach you how to turn all your dirty old tired sea monsters at the back of the fridge into, like, give them a new life. So chimichurris and pestos and
then when you've got a pesto, that okay, pasta's on the menu.
Yeah. So it's, again, we just want to like really get into your head about the cycle of food. And I think food storage, really, please learn how to store your food well. I mean, that's hospitality training, because if you buy lots of things and you don't store it well and it goes off, you're just throwing money in the bin, basically. And also not just money, like you do have to think about all the hidden environmental costs of the water and the energy and the electricity that it took to get that food into your house. So please store it well and care for it. And we come at two different approach. Sorry, Jaimee, you go.
Oh no, so the book, further broken into ingredients, has storage advice in each ingredient. Yeah.
And I think we also, like, we're big on storage and we're big on shopping smart, but we're really big on falling in love with an ingredient. So if you know its history, or if you know its flavor profiles, or if you know something about, like Jaimee and I are secretly kitchen witches in the background as well, making potions and mixtures. If you know something medicinal about a herb, you're probably not going to let it go to waste as much because you value it. And our grandmothers and great-grandmothers didn't throw food away because, firstly, they couldn't afford it, but also there was a value around food, which we've lost in the industrialized food system that we're in. And that's what we need to do again. So, like, do a bit of reading. Jaimee gives me tidbits every single day.
We both do. Let's not pretend. Alex, for Alex's, was it your 40th birthday? The Healing Herbs book.
Oh yes, which I have right here. It's holding something up. But like Jaimee bought me this book called Healing Spices. So I am fully, like, I know everything there is to know about star anise or everything there is to know about turmeric. And it makes, I mean, like, you know, I'm a full nerd about that stuff, but it does make me really appreciate every ingredient that I use. So go and do some reading. And you will find bits in Use It All as well, like the celery, which has a big history.
It's an aphrodisiac.
It is. It's an aphrodisiac. Who knew? Forget about the oysters. Just buy a big bunch of celery.
And so when you feel like, oh, I can't get through that celery, think again, you might be motivated to get through every last leaf.
Especially during lockdown. So this conversation's going a different direction, but just knowing things, about ingredients makes you care for them more. And I think that's a really important message to get across, which we hope comes across in the book as well. Like lots of practical information, but lots of, I don't know, like interesting facts which make you love food more.
You can't have a relationship with a packet of 2-minute noodles, or maybe you can. My son might disagree with me, but there's something about ingredients, fresh ingredients that, you know, if you let it, you will have a relationship that you will be motivated to learn how to optimize cooking with that in every which way.
Even if you're very tired.
Yeah, even if you're very tired, you might be like, oh, you know, like apples. Apples have an incredible history. If you are interested in horticulture or agriculture, you know, there's mind-boggling variety of apples. But if you know something about an apple, you'll know that you want to experiment. You know, you can make your own ciders, your own vinegars, you can ferment apples, apple pie, apple is in savory foods. It'll go on, and it's just come out of a simple love for an ingredient.
And I think on that note, like when Jaimee's saying, and make cider and make vinegar, it all sounds like difficult and hard, but I'm just going to give a quick, like, practical tip here. You make apple crumble, you make apple chutney, you make apple pie, whatever you're doing. Stewing apples. If you have peeled your apples, pop them into a big jar, cover it with water. For every cup of water, add a tablespoon of vinegar and a tablespoon of sugar. Cover it with muslin, put a rubber band on it. That is the start of vinegar. That's a 1-minute job. Like, do that while you're bloody stirring your apples. You know, while you're making spaghetti bolognese, if you've got 2 sticks of celery left, turn those 2 sticks of celery, like, quick pickle them. And then next week you put that in your salad and you have tabbouleh or a Bloody Mary or whatever floats your boat.
At the same time, you've got 2 little tricks up your sleeve. You know, you go out in the world and you're like, oh, I can make vinegar.
Something to say at a party, if we ever go to a party.
I guess one of the things that I've noticed, you know, visiting other people's houses and people coming around, is that there's a real question mark and a bit of a fear around things going off and eating food that's off. And so, you know, I guess some of the pickling and these sorts of things head towards areas where people might be a bit worried about food health, you know, their own health and food safety. And so their sort of default is to chuck it out instead of risk it. What would you say about that?
Oh, can we be
so much to say about that?
Are we allowed to just say exactly what we want to say? I just also want to preface this. I do run a hospitality business and we are very, very safe and very,
I'm the food safety officer for the school. So when we are
debatable.
Yeah. we are loosey-goosey about things only because we have done everything. But I think it goes back to that, when you know food, when you know an ingredient, you are not afraid, you are more confident with your senses, and you are not afraid to stick your nose in something and smell it, maybe taste it, and you will reorientate your own instincts. And like when something smells god awful, you are probably going to know that it's time to say goodbye. If it's, you know, often things will be fine. The use by date might be a couple of days and you smell it and you're like, I smell nothing. That yogurt smells totally fine. Taste it. You're not, nothing's going to happen. Like really, I've had people in classes who they've told me they've had a little speck of mold on their bread and they've thrown the whole loaf away. Like, it's hugely wasteful. That person's not to blame. They just have no sense of, no relationship with food. Cut that little bit off, discard that, put that in the compost, and your bread is fine. It is really a matter of that.
We've been taught
sound advice, yes?
Yeah, that's no, we've been taught to be very afraid of food, and also of time, TIME, in that if something is hanging around for a long time, we are worried. We've been taught to worry about it. Whereas you have to look back in time about preservation, and preservation was to, help civilization actually survive by keeping food through periods of time when there was no food.
No refrigeration.
No refrigeration.
Yeah.
We have refrigeration. We have so much more access to everything, but we have so much more fear. So really, like, reconnect with your senses, smell stuff, look at stuff, taste stuff, listen to stuff. Like, fermenting, sauerkraut should fizz. A vinegar-based pickle should not fizz. So if you can hear your vinegar pickles, that's not a good sign. So I think it's trusting your instincts again. There is nothing wrong with white mold. If you're pregnant, or if, whatever, don't listen to me whatsoever, but we eat white mold on cheeses and on salamis, and then we see it somewhere else and we start screaming. So I can't encourage anyone to eat mold, and I am not encouraging anyone to eat mold, but I hope everyone's hearing what I'm saying behind that message.
But know the difference. Like, you apply your food knowledge. Like you said, like, there's salami, and then if it appears somewhere else, like, use that food knowledge that we do have, and learn.
And I think with the preservation thing, sorry, Julian, I feel like if you've got lots of vinegar on something, if you've got lots of salt or lots of oil on something, it's very, very hard for food to go off. Those ingredients preserve food, and that's what they do. So I think that trust in that as well. Learn the basics and experiment.
Question from the audience is, how do we then impart this to the younger generation? So it does, the generational knowledge starts to build up again.
Well, we've got an issue because Jaimee and I both have teenagers, and they are rejecting us and rejecting our. So it's not going to be our children that.
They're not pickling, that's for sure.
No one's interested in pickling, but I think it's actually. I hope that we wrote this book also for our kids, because I feel like it's the book that we need to give them when they finally move out of home, and I hope that is something that people do. I keep encouraging, like, give it to your young people, give it to your young people. I think young people are much more engaged environmentally and politically and socially than we had to be. And I think that will come out in more ways than we even realize. And I think food and food security and growing food, it has to become more common, I guess, because they're growing up in a different time to us. So I think we need to almost worry less about the young people and worry more about us and the generations above us. And also, like, busy families with young kids, they're the ones that, like, there's too much to do. Like, I know how much there is to do. So I'm not so worried about the young people. I mean, having said that, I'm always like, we don't do that. We don't throw half of this away. My kids are so annoyed by me, but yeah, I'm hoping that it will turn out well.
And I think instilling anyone, regardless of their age, instilling into them that cooking, being able to feed yourself and people that you love, is a pleasure. I feel like there's this battle with prepackaged foods, which are increasingly appearing in the supermarket, that cooking is somehow a drag, it's an inconvenience.
Something that your mum does.
It's just like, I think if there's the relationship with cooking and food is just a bit more positive, that it's not time wasted in the kitchen. I mean, man, there's so much time wasted doing, like, people don't think twice about,
Scrolling on Instagram.
yeah, but
I
cooking a meal is never time wasted.
And if there is anyone in the audience who works for TAFE or writes the programs for schools, Jaimee and I want to do that, because we think we need to bring in the food-based angle as well. So just putting that out there. One day someone will knock on the door.
Fantastic. There is a teacher who's written in who's keen for that to happen. So
great.
We love working with kids, and we've worked with high schools, and we
like writing programs as well. So
great. So
cool.
You're welcome to be contacted afterwards.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, look, it's not easy to change habits in the kitchen, and we've talked a lot about, increasing your food knowledge. We're busy. I guess lockdown really is a great time to learn some of this, isn't it? We've got more time. We're not traveling around as much. So I just want to ask you a few sort of, tips in the kitchen. It's quite specific ones that people might be able to take on straight away.
Sure. Yep.
But I guess also there's that question in there. There's a lot of talk about seasonality. We do live in we live in a pretty global world. We're getting food from all around the world. Why is eating seasonally and locally important?
Well, I mean, I think people need to realise that when there's a insipid tomato appears in the supermarket in the middle of winter, I mean, the first indication is going to be it's $14 a kilo, something absurd. It is a rather sad version of its summer self. It didn't just appear on the supermarket shelf, and so the resources it takes to get that out of season ingredient into the supermarket purely because there's this misunderstanding from retailers that the customer wants that, demands that in the middle of winter. I'm not sure if that's quite right, but I think there's this bad cycle where it just appears, so most people just buy it because they buy tomatoes. We love tomatoes, and there's just a little bit of I don't want to be like waving my finger, but it's a bit thoughtless on everyone's part. But every ingredient that ends up in the marketplace, in the supermarket, has arrived there because of transport, labor, energy. So it's a lot to get those ingredients on the shelf. And so it matters for those reasons.
Also, when you eat in season, you're saving yourself money, but it's also food not only tastes better, but it's more nutritious as well. Like, it's a time when it should be growing. In winter, we have citrus because we need vitamin C to ward off colds. So I think it's really important to kind of understand the big picture around seasonality and decide which part that suits you. People often say to us that they don't know what the season is. And I just want to say Google. Like, if you don't instinctively know, just Google it. It's very easy to find out. My main tip, though, is if you go into the supermarket or the fruit and veggie shop or even the fruit markets, whatever is in a big pile at the front is in season because there's cheap. And cheap. It's cheap and they want to move it quickly because they have an abundance of it. It also means you're supporting local growers. So it's kind of a win-win. So just don't even go into the back shelves. Just get everything at those front parts and then you'll know you're eating seasonally as well.
Great. So a flavour tip is to eat seasonally. The difference between a crunchy strawberry and out of season and a beautiful, juicy, tasty one.
Exactly. So yeah, see, it's flavour, it's nutrition, it's money saving, and it's a big environmental choice as well to make.
So there's questions coming through, how do we engage kids? How do we have their taste buds light up, especially when there is just so much sugar and processed food around? What's a top tip from you two about how to make things kids friendly?
Do you know what? My top tip is just, if you've got small children, just relax about it, because as they get older, they still make bad choices, but they start to eat better. So have it accessible to them all the time. So, you know, obviously reach for a banana before you reach for an Uncle Toby's muesli bar, but I backfired. No sugar touched my darling children's mouths, and they're completely obsessed with it. So I feel like this kind of actually moderation across the board is the way to go. And they, you know, they know the difference between food that feels good and food that doesn't feel good. And as you know, I've got early middle range teens, they are slowly starting to make good choices. So, and I get so excited when that happens. But I think also give yourself a bit of a break as well, because we're in lockdown and we kind of need to just get through. We're homeschooling children, and you know, there are Tim Tams in my pantry. It is not all homemade tahini muesli bars, I can tell you, but it is that balance that I think I'm hoping, like not restricting them from things, is going to have a better outcome at the end as well.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, there's a variety around that. They have access to good fresh food. They see the adults in their lives eating those kind of things. But also,
think of it as a longer journey. Like when we had small children, we didn't realize that parenting was such a long journey. So everything seemed so important right then, whereas I think now I'm looking at it as over a 20-year time span. There's a lot that's going to go on in there. But I think also get them in the kitchen. Like last night, my 13-year-old cooked dinner, and Jaimee and I are actually writing a new cookbook at the moment, and I got him to make something that I was wondering if it would work. And suddenly he was eating this like very garlicky charred broccoli thing without me saying, it'd be great if you ate something green. And I was like, it's the engaging them with it. We also, without like killing yourself in the process when you're exhausted and you think that your 3-year-old needs to help make dinner. Like I think get them in the kitchen, get them in the garden, take them to the shops with you, you know, all those.
And let them also do it. My son, he's 18. His meal is nachos. Like, I don't want to eat that every single night. I don't want him to eat that. But if he's in the kitchen and that's his meal right now, this is his signature dish, he's going to grow up and he's going to make other meals. But right now what matters is that he's in the kitchen, he's confident, and he serves it up and he thinks he's
Michelin star.
I'm just like, sure, pasta sour cream. But like, that's what matters, is that he's excited about it.
And I think, like Jaimee said before, having a good relationship with food is probably the most important thing. And having a good relationship with food also means, sitting on the couch and eating a packet of Tim Tams with your teenagers and having a laugh, as much as it means having a kale pesto and all the mung bean, whatever.
Thank you. Look, one of the really frustrating things, I think, as a shopper, is you buy your leafy greens with all good intentions, and whether that's your herbs or your big leafy greens like the kale or the spinach, and I think a lot of people struggle to get to them before they wilt, and you're sort of not really keen to use them. So there's questions around how do you store them and how do you use them, and can you rejuvenate them before they wilt out of existence?
Yes, I have a lot to say. We both have a lot to say. And again, there is so much information in Use It All. We break it down not just into basket, but each ingredient covers all the storage, all the, things to do when it's at its best and things to do when it's at its worst. The main thing to do is, as soon as you get home, is to really do a bit of a stock take and look after what you've bought. So leafy greens are a really hard one. Anything that's kind of sturdy-ish, so kale, cavolo nero, even like a cos lettuce, slightly dampen a tea towel and wrap it up almost like a kebab, if you've rolled a kebab, or a cigar, if anyone's ever rolled a cigar, maybe a baby. Roll it up, swaddle it in a slightly damp tea towel, and then don't wash it before you put it in the fridge. You wash it before you're going to use it, because otherwise it quickens the deterioration process. And then pop that bundle into a bag, whether that's a reusable plastic bag or it's a calico bag or whatever you've got. into the fridge. And your kale, I can guarantee, like, you will honestly be wanting that thing to go off because it lasts so well that you have to actually eat it. You have to go through the whole process. When you take that out and you're going to take 2 of your kale leaves, don't just shove it back in the fridge. Go through, if your tea towel's dry, slightly dampen it. Like, I know it sounds a bit pedantic, but that's the stuff that's going to really make your food last well. Herbs can get stored like that too, except for basil, because basil doesn't like the cold, so it doesn't go in the fridge. So just store that in a jar on the bench top. It likes dappled light, actually, quite particular. But the rest of the herbs can get stored either in a, like I use a chucks, an old chucks for herbs, or a tea towel as well. And then actually I had something here which I thought might be handy. This is a container, obviously. I'll hold it that way so you can see better. And I've got some things in there that I don't want to completely go off, but I'm not ready to use them because I've got other things to use. So it's celery, the top of some fennel, and also some leek. So I've popped them in that container, and I don't know if you can see on the screen, but I've just put like an inch of water in the bottom. And that is a really great way to keep things fresh for a longer period of time. So if you do buy celery, I chop the leaves off and bundle them up. I chop the base off and I put the base in the freezer for when I'm going to make stock. And just the sticks I keep in a container like that with a bit of water in the bottom. It just keeps things really fresh. So I will probably end up making a vegetable stock out of those scraps, and I just keep collecting over the week. But that little bit of water in there stops things drying out as well. If you are going to do that for 2 weeks, you're going to need to change that water because it will get a bit woofy. But yeah, that's a really good handy tip. And if your herbs do get really tired and old, seriously, make chimichurri. Like, it's like you just put everything kind of gross and green. It's in your fridge in the food processor with garlic and salt and a little bit of vinegar and like maybe a bit of cumin and oil, and whiz it up and then just smear it on everything. It's delicious on steak and potatoes and roast pumpkin and in a sandwich.
Toast in the morning. But also I think use the first, like what looks the most fragile, like your herbs first. So and work backwards from there. So, you'll start your week. If you're going to, your intention is to use the herbs fresh, start with them, work backwards, go into your silver beet or whatever, and with your potatoes. And just it's knowing something about your ingredients.
So if you bought zucchinis and potatoes, don't have mashed potatoes on the first night of the week. Do deal with your zucchinis first. And the other thing is to know that things like green beans, for example, you buy them when they're lovely and fresh. So that's when it would be nice to eat them kind of blanched, or something where they don't need much cooking. Even raw would be great. As the week goes on and they get a bit dry, they're going to need some kind of cooking method. So it might be a quick stir fry. It might be a quick char, like something that gives them a little bit more. And then you get to the end of the week, or even the week after, like you've really forgotten about them. And they're, not great, quite limp, possibly even slimy. I've got no issues with some slimy beans. Then you would do something slow cooked. So you might, saute an onion, chuck your dirty old beans in, put a can of tomatoes on top and, I don't know, cumin and coriander or whatever it is, or dill, and then cook that for like half an hour and like really let that soften and get velvety and delicious. No one knows that they were slimy beans. Like in half an hour, they turn into something kind of magical. So it's kind of also knowing what cooking techniques are needed with very fresh, beautiful produce, as opposed to a week-old, 2-week-old stuff that you actually need to hide. You need to hide the sins there.
Thank you. And I guess also it means that not only can you not tell, but also any of that sort of food safety issue is taken care of at the same time by slow, long cooking.
Yeah. Kills anything nasty.
Do you have any, thoughts on organic versus non-organic?
Yes, I do. I feel I've got thoughts on everything, Julian, obviously. Look, Jaimee and I are big believers in making this kind of cooking and eating really accessible to everyone. Organic food is not accessible to everyone. It's not in everyone's budget, and it's not often easily found either. obviously I'm really big on local, and that's what Cornersmith is built on. It's not built on organic food. But I think people have to make decisions around the way food is grown and pesticides and all that stuff for yourself. We also, like, I live under the flight path. I feel like it's, what am I doing? Buying very, very expensive organic things all the time. There's some things that I like. I really like getting organic broccoli. I really like getting organic kale, but I don't always. Sometimes I just pop up to Woolies because it's handy and I get it there. So yes, I think organic is great. But also sometimes organic farming is giant. And I would rather, and giant isn't always good when it comes to food production. So I would rather support a smaller grower who is conventional than a giant organic corporation. Is that okay to say?
We're after your thoughts. Jaimee, what about you?
No, I totally concur. I think, yeah, sometimes, organic can be a bit of a tricky label because it can very much be a label, and it can gloss some not great labor practices, or can it be run by a really large corporation? So it can, sometimes I'm a bit organic. I do favour local over organic. I think some organic produce is obviously lovely if you can be organic and local and the grower. I mean, all those things are just beautiful at the farmers markets, but that's also not everyone's life. I live in Marrickville, and I have access to a lovely farmers market, but not, some people live much further out. There's not a farmers market. And I think we're in Alex and I are in the business of people feeling excited about food, and that should be the food that is within reach to them, not having any shame around it. If you have to, you shop at Woolies, you shop at Woolies because that's what's there. If you shop at the farmers markets, then bully for you. Like we're all doing the best we can. And I think any kind of discussion where anyone feels like their choices are compromised and feel bad about that isn't helping the cause. So, and
I think also within whatever framework that you have, you can make a good decision. Yeah. So whatever ingredient you're buying, wherever you're buying it from, there is a way to buy the better option. And is that it's Australian? Is that it doesn't come in plastic? Is that that it's in season? Like choose your battles, choose the things that work, and try and make the very best decision as well.
Having said that, I would like to see everyone who shops at Woolies, and that's including me, and that's including people who just absolutely have no other choice. I would like us as consumers to try and get them to stop wrapping their herbs in plastic.
And not just their herbs. I would like to see that whole aisle of chopped up vegetables gone that are wrapped in plastic. Why? How hard can it be to chop up a carrot?
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I, on that I reckon, a bit of a top tip is if you're to grow one thing, it'd be a bunch of herbs.
A bunch of herbs.
Absolutely.
You
100%.
You only need a little bit of it, right? They sell these massive bunches that, you basically have to make pesto with.
Yeah.
Or waste it.
Yeah.
So, growing a pot or two of herbs on your windowsill, that's probably one of the best ways of getting that flavour zing, that appreciation, and reducing that waste.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see, how are we going? Well, we've got 5 minutes. I guess one last question. There's a question here about, there's a comment, which is that there's so much knowledge already in the community that we've touched on, especially from different cultural groups. And their question is, do you have any tips on sort of tapping into that, how to bridge that and bring that knowledge back out?
Sorry, is that question of knowledge from other cultural groups around food? How do we access that?
Yeah, how do we access that? Engaging with,
Well, we are lucky we're in the inner west, which is an incredibly multicultural area. So we have a really big Vietnamese population. My next door neighbour speaks to me in Greek. I don't speak Greek, but she taught me how to preserve and cure olives in Greek as well. And I feel like it's, you're right, there is so much knowledge that is lost, and so many cultures preserve and cook foods in ways that we don't often have access to that information. And I think it's looking for it. So when I was talking about the trading at the beginning of this session and noticing all this food dropping on the footpath, the way I started engaging with food and food waste was that I started knocking on people's doors and saying to them, you know, there's the kumquat tree and all your kumquats are dropping, or there's, you know, your mulberries, they're all dropping. Would you mind if I took them? And I spoke to people that I would never normally engage with in my neighborhood, and was given so many recipes and so many tips. Like, I know now that salted kumquats cure a sore throat from this very ancient Vietnamese guy, and he gave me his recipe, and it honestly is true. Salted kumquats cure your sore throat. And I feel like it's talking to people, it's engaging with your neighborhood and your community, and it's also lots of research. Like, Jaimee and I will be like, oh my God, did you know in the Philippines they make ketchup out of bananas? Like, I've never heard of that before. So now part of my repertoire with all those bloody brown bananas that we've all got is a banana ketchup. You will find that recipe in our new cookbook that is coming. And I think that I don't know, that's how I feel like I start to learn, is that actually looking to different cultures around their practices around how to not throw food away. Like, if you've got an abundance of something, what you do with that as well. Jaimee, have you got more to say on that?
Well, yeah, I again, it's being alert to the culture, the global culture of food. My mum's side of my family is Russian, so we have a really strong preserving culture. But you know, when we have the cooking school, I do a pilomeni class, which is a Russian dumpling. We have lots of all the Russians in Sydney seem to come to that class. But like Alex was saying earlier, they all come, and there's a generation of people who lost a lot of those traditions. So we're kind of refinding our feet with all of that together. And I think that just that enthusiasm, regardless of whatever your cultural background is, will be how you find that information.
Thank you. If we can't connect over food, what can we connect over?
Exactly.
So look, we need to wrap up, but I really want to thank you both for being here and imparting your wisdom and sharing the passion. We've had pretty much 140 people for that entire time.
Amazing.
Amazing. Thank you for your interest. And I guess it's not really surprising to me that so many people have turned out to hear you talk, because, you know, we know from having just introduced FOGO, the Food Organic collection, the Randwick residents, that we've been collecting almost 1.5 tons of food every single month. And that's not going into landfill, it's going across to composting to make more soil. And the amount that's going into their red bins is reduced by 28%. And I think that, you know, it's really wonderful to hear direct from you as the authors, and to then have that book of yours at home to be cooking for, and remembering, you know, your faces and hearing you speak, and having that inspire us to cook more food and to waste less along the way.
And to use it all, Julian.
Use it all.
And isn't there, you were saying to me before, Julian, that it's actually more important now, more than ever, actually, to even reduce composting.
Yeah.
Actually do more for the planet as a whole by even reducing our FOGO waste.
So yeah, apparently, you know, obviously food into landfill is just a waste, but by using it all, it actually has 10 times the climate change impact than composting it has. Composting is great, but if we can eat it has 10 times the impact.
And that's a really important message, in that really the main thing we want to get across is learn how to cook, but learn how to use all parts of things. And I don't think we discussed much of that tonight, but the book is full of like what to do with the tops of leeks, what to do with the tops of fennel. Did you know you can turn beetroot leaves like basically into chips? You know, it's kind of really not just nose to tail eating, but root to the top of a vegetable leaf.
Root to leaf?
Yeah, I think that might be it. But I think that's a big thing, is that we do feel like we throw things into the compost and think, oh, well, I'm composting it. But it actually is not the very best solution. The best solution is to find something else to turn it into that's equally delicious.
Thank you. So Alex and Jaimee, if anyone wants to get in touch with you directly, we've got so many lovely comments and questions which we are going to pass on to you after this event. But if anyone would like to get in touch with you or book into your school when we're eventually out of this lockdown, how do people do that? Do they just go onto your website and find you that way?
Yeah, so if you hop onto the website, you'll find our cooking school. Unfortunately, we are on pause at the moment, but as soon as we can, we will be back. You can still see all the classes that we run. We run our classes seasonally, so hopefully when summer comes, we're running our tomato day classes and the chili classes, all the seasonal classes as well. We also have an online store where you can buy our cookbooks, you can buy all of our pickles and preserves, and lots of the simple preserving equipment that you need if you're interested in things as well. And then obviously we have the Annandale Cafe, but I can't really encourage anyone outside of 10 kilometres to go there right now, sadly. But when we are out of lockdown, please come and visit.
We will be all there knocking the door down.
And obviously Instagram is a great way to get in touch, and that would be direct access to me and Jaimee as well. So if there's anything that anyone really needs to ask us, then Instagram would be a great way.
And one last final question, I'm going to ask it on behalf of this person, is are you able to reveal the name of your new cookbook, or is it still a bit too early for that yet?
It doesn't have a name yet.
It
doesn't have a name, but
names.
Yeah, no names. But it is going to be. It's a kitchen guide again, and it's going to be in A to Z format. So you will find an ingredient, and you will, you've got a little bit of something in your fridge. You turn to that chapter, and you get to explore everything that you ever wanted to know about broccoli.
So the alphabet of using it all.
Yeah, the alphabet of using it all. Exactly.
We thought, oh God, we exhausted ourselves to use it all, but we have so much more.
There's going to be so
more to use.
Luckily, we're in lockdown, so we're eating and cooking and writing a lot at the moment. So it's not too bad.
Well, on behalf of Randwick City Library, thank you to you both, Alex and Jaimee. Thank you so much for joining us and facilitating our event tonight. It was really nice to have you here and have your expertise. And everyone at home who are still watching, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support. We hope we can get our doors open again soon. Our library online is always open. We are always adding new events and programs, so please watch out in our calendar for that. Sign up to our newsletter, follow our socials, all of the above, and we'll let you know. So hopefully we'll have more fantastic events like this one. It's been an absolute pleasure listening. I've learned a few things. I've been inspired to get my herb garden back in action. It's waning. And thank you so much. Can't say more thanks.
Thank you so much for having us, and we're big fans of what Randwick Council does as well, so committed to sustainability. So that's really, thank you for having us.